Good morning, homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. We are back in what I call the perennial garden, but it's actually our raised bed garden in this section, doing an August garden tour. It is August 9th. It's about 6:15 in the morning, and let's see what's going on in the garden. So I am in zone 7A in Southeast Washington, and we have had incredible heat in the last 5 weeks. I'll put the number of days over 95 up on the screen, but I know July it was 17. And so this garden is 6 4x8 foot metal raised beds that are filled with a mixture of compost, soil, and forest fines, which means decomposted bark basically from one of our local nurseries. It's a very nice mix. And then I've topped it off over the years with a variety of other compost materials, dried leaves and straw and things, usually in the fall. And you can see our soil level is down a little bit. I really like to keep these all the way to the top, but our actual parent soil underneath is quite good. And so just trying to add some nutrition availability. Look at this lovely guy. There's a second one right there. And I've been waiting to pick these until I filmed this because I wanted you guys to be able to see them on the vine. So this is Rosa Bianca. This is an eggplant, obviously. And this one is an Italian variety. She's getting quite tall. Got a nice further blossom still coming on there. And then the other 3 eggplants in this bed are what's called Little Finger. And it is a Japanese variety. I've picked probably 10 out of here already this season. And I've been making, I have a Smitten Kitchen recipe of roasted eggplant pasta salad with a sun-dried tomato pesto on it that's quite lovely. And so I've been making that along with some baba ganoush, and I'll probably make some ratatouille or some puttanesca. So lots of eggplant things coming out of the garden. The rest of this bed is peppers, except for on the very end. So this is celery here. That should look familiar to you. And I just pull off stalks as I need them here, and then I'll harvest the whole thing in the fall. The rest of this bed is peppers, and these are sweet peppers, with the exception of a jalapeno and a Hungarian black. And so these are called Carmen, and they turn red. You can see one that's red back there. It's a sweet pepper, similar to a bell pepper in terms of sweetness, but a different shape. These don't tend to get sunburned the way a regular bell pepper does. Regular bell peppers have that shoulder, and that shoulder faces the sun, and they tend to get scorched and sunburned. And so I really love this variety of pepper because it stays sweet. It's an incredibly sweet pepper. It's my favorite sweet pepper, but it does not get sunburned, and so you don't get nearly as much damage. There's another. The other variety that's in here is called Stocky Red Roaster. And I've yet to do a side-by-side comparison of the two, but the Stocky Red Roaster is an open pollinated variety that I could save seeds from, and the Carmen is a hybrid where seeds would not be great because it would not stay true to its form. But lots of great peppers in here. You can see I've got a lot of things staked up. This bed gets quite a bit of morning shade, and so things are a little bit leggy and they're getting tall. And my experience with peppers is they need to be staked late in the season. They tend to fall over if you don't keep them staked, and same with eggplant. So that's the pepper and eggplant bed, doing really well. Very happy with this. This bed was garlic, and I pulled all the garlic out right after I filmed the July garden tour. And so right now there's just some weeds in here. This little guy that you see here is wood sorrel. It's actually edible, but it spreads like wildfire. The little flower pods that you see on here, they're a little kind of 5-petaled daisy-like flower. And when those turn into flower pods, if you touch them, they explode and they just scatter their seed. And so once you have it, it's virtually impossible to get rid of it. This is our Nigella, which I've talked about in all of the other videos. You can see how tall it's gotten. It's way up here. And I've harvested about half of this, and I'm waiting to harvest the second half. This one still has, this was a latecomer. It's still got some flowers, so it's still blooming, which is lovely. But I've got a whole bucket of these seeds, and basically I'm waiting to harvest these until they get this little dried split at the top. And that's an indication that that pod is fully mature and ripe. And a lot of these have it, but a lot of them aren't there yet. Like these guys, not really at that point. In the rest of this bed, this is sweet pea, which has kind of taken over the planet. There was a lot of borage in here, and I just tore most of this out the other day because the garden is getting so full that I'm losing my aisles and it's getting hard to maneuver. And so I needed to tear that out in order to be able to get around. Here's some of it still blooming a little bit. It's mostly done. And then here's a brand new one that's just getting going. So it just keeps coming. It's very succulent, a little bit scratchy, but the bees absolutely adore it, and so I always leave it in. Sweet peas, these are about ready to be torn out. They're getting dried out just from the heat. We've had incredible heat, as I mentioned, but lovely. So this bed is finished, and I'm going to put fall brassicas in here in about 2 to 3 weeks. So broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage. This bed was all the brassicas from the spring, and got a few left, so I've still got some kale in here. We just watered with an overhead irrigation, which we don't usually do, and so everything's kind of fallen out of the center here and fallen over. You can see that kale plant has just completely fallen over. And I have not harvested nearly enough of this. I really need to get in here and do one big harvest. Usually my kale starts getting aphids late in the season, and I haven't seen a lot of it, and so I've just kind of been ignoring it because the plant has been holding pretty well. Here we go. I bet this is, yeah. So when you start seeing this distorted leaf, that's usually an indication that you've got some aphids in there. Oh, no, that's just a spider. Hello, buddy. So we got a little spider hanging out in there. But usually I start seeing distorted leaves. That's a pretty good indication that the aphids have gotten in there. And I will start harvesting a lot more at that point because I know the crop is getting infested and I want to harvest it before it's too far gone. These two plants right here and right here, these were broccoli, still are broccoli, and I harvested the big head off of them, and then I've been harvesting some side shoots, still getting a few, but they're about done and need to be torn out. And then the kale will last all the way to the end of the season. And then this Swiss chard was a volunteer. I had a different plant here, and this was also in the pot. And when I tore the other plant out, this really took off. And honestly, it's the best looking Swiss chard of all the three that I have. And so I've just left it because what I've discovered from this plant is I need to stop planting my Swiss chard in the spring because it gets terrible infestations with leaf miners. And so if I have a really late season one, it's past the season of the leaf miners, and I have virtually no leaf miner damage on these leaves. So this looks amazing. And so I'll harvest some of that. I have a good recipe for a Swiss chard enchilada, of all things. That's quite good. But then I also just like to freeze it and use it as kind of a generic green. The other thing that has been replanted in this bed that doesn't look like much right now is we have beets. Here's a little baby beet that's just come up. And then I also have carrots in here. And the carrots, there's one right there. And they're actually, if you start looking closely, there's actually quite a few of them in there. And so carrots, amazing that they came up in this super hot heat. I thought it might be too hot for them to germinate, but they have rocketed out of the ground, which is exciting. And so I'm going to have a nice fall crop of carrots in here. This, by the way, this little tiny weed with the heart-shaped leaves, this is common mallow. And you can always recognize it by those little heart-shaped leaves. And so as soon as I see it, I pull it out. But yeah, so we'll have a nice crop of carrots, fall carrots in this bed, and then the kale will stay until the end of the season. Fun update over on this side since I'm here. This is a hibiscus. And I had a bunch of these in here. Most of them did not survive. And this one looks terrible, I think because of the ground that it's growing in. I just don't think there's enough nutrition. But this one has done okay. And these are the red part. That was a flower. And then this is what's called the calyx, which is the outer portion of the flower. And that's the part that peels off and that you harvest for tea. And so if you've ever had hibiscus tea, Red Zinger is a classic hibiscus tea. I grew it myself, and that's really, really fun. So I'm very excited to have a few of those. I obviously didn't get very much. And this is a semi-tropical plant, so it's not going to survive the winter. But I think I'm going to try it again next year in better soil and in a pot and see if I can get a much bigger plant than what I had this year. This over here is a different hibiscus. This is called Luna, and this is the only one that has survived and done well. But you can see she's getting some buds, so we might actually get a flower out of that before the season ends. And this one may survive the winter. And so I kind of put it over here on purpose because it wasn't a bad spot for a perennial. So we'll see what happens there, but that's kind of fun. This, from all the way over, climbing into this bed, all the way over this 8-foot bed, and climbing outside of that 8-foot end. This is my zucchini. So this is Costata romanesca, and it's my favorite zucchini by a long, long way. I really love it. And I always plant 3 or 4 because sometimes stuff happens to the plants. And so I want to make sure that I end up with a couple of them alive. But this year, all 4 of them have survived. And one big disadvantage, aside from this ridiculous size, is these are super, super pokey. And so I really have to wear pants when I'm in here harvesting. And my arms are scratched up this time of year just from reaching into the plant and trying to harvest the zucchini. So, oh, hello, little Hummer. How are you? So very pokey. There's a beautiful, you guys can see that down in there. There's a gorgeous one that's ready to harvest. But they've done very, very well. And I have sold many, many zucchini off of this. I have a small food hub that I'm part of. And so I sell what I don't eat myself. But yeah, this plant is insane. And we're going to have to do something because eventually I would like to plant something else in here. Growing up this trellis, these are long beans, Asian long beans. And once they find the trellis, they do quite well. If you remember, I had peas here early in the season. And so I planted these next to the peas, and so it took them a long time to take off because they were getting a lot of shade. But now they're pretty happy. And I keep cutting off. You can see I've cut off many leaves here. I keep cutting off the leaves of the zucchini so that they're not completely shading these out. But once they get climbing, they're going to be just fine. But those are long beans, really fun. And you can see, here's the end of a blossom, so that'll be fun when those start really coming on. And then this is our cucumber, and this is 3 plants that have managed to get all the way to the top of this trellis. And these were also planted next to the peas. And I have probably harvested at least 20, yeah, probably more than that. I'm guessing more like 30 cucumbers off of this. This is a Japanese variety. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. I'll put it up on the screen. But you can see it's a long slicing cucumber. They're quite large. They do not get bitter at all, so they never get bitter in the heat. And they're wildly prolific, and they don't really seem to be bothered at all by the heat. They just keep coming. And this was my experience last year. We had a very similar summer last year where it was just stupid hot. And these guys just kept coming and coming and coming. So I cannot recommend this variety enough. If you want to make pickles, they're not the best for pickles. They're more of a slicing, eating cucumber. Look at the length of that. I mean, the tip of my hand, almost to my elbow. So incredibly long, beautiful, and wildly prolific. So I really, really love this variety. So this bed, early in the season, was lettuce and spinach. I replanted lettuce in here and spinach in this side. I don't know if I'm going to get anything. I think it was just way too hot. I planted it when we were getting a brief lull where it was down into the 80s again, and then it went right back up into the high 90s, and I think I just fried everything that was in there. So I'm going to have to try again on that and do a little later planting. And then this is okra. It's very slow to get going despite the heat, and I probably have too many plants in here, which I'm sure is not helping anything. But you can see, here's the buds. And I have 3 different varieties in here. This is also a hibiscus family. They have a very pretty hibiscus-like flower. This one's doing pretty good too. And then once they flower, they almost immediately start forming the okra plant. And so I should have some okra out of here sometime in the next couple of weeks. But this is very fun, and I'm kind of excited about it. And it's been fun to watch basically these plants be completely unfazed by the amount of heat that we've had here. In this bed also are a couple of hollyhocks. It's funny to think how tiny these were back in May when I was still able to throw a net over them, because at this point they are probably 10 feet. And this was a double. I'm not a huge fan of pink, and unfortunately this turned out to be a pink one. It was a mixed flower color, and so pink was the one that this turned out to be. So I will probably take this one out of here just because I do not love the pink color, although the flower itself is very pretty. And then this one, which is still blooming a little bit, was a black variety. It's not quite as big, but I'll save some seed from this one because it's really quite lovely. And it's still going. You can see the damage on the leaves. That's rust. We just get that with our hollyhocks locally. There's pretty much, it's inevitable. And so I don't fight it. You get a sense of this cucumber from the other side. And right now I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. At least 8 cucumbers on there from 3 plants. So kind of amazing. This little guy, this is a lettuce that was in the corner of this bed, and I just left it. And so this is getting ready to go to seed, and I will sprinkle some of the seed out here, and then a lot of times they'll volunteer themselves in the early spring, and you'll get an early spring lettuce crop just from letting it overwinter outside. I did get in that little guy right there, that is a lettuce. And there's another one right there. So there are a few that managed to brave the heat, but I'm not sure. I don't think any of the spinach is going to come up. Me and spinach, we have a thing where most of the time I can't get it to come up. It's either too hot or too cold. And then here is our sweet potato bed. And I think it's fair to say these have been pretty happy with the heat. They are starting to climb out into the aisle. I can't remember how many total slips I planted in here. I would have to go back, but there's 3 different varieties. They've been very, very happy. So it's going to be really exciting to harvest this bed. I have heard that if you come in and trim off these runners, that you get smaller but more potatoes, and that if you don't trim off these runners, you get bigger, fewer potatoes. So I will probably come in here and cut some of this back, at least on this side, just because it's getting a little bit out of hand. But these leaves are actually edible. I've never actually eaten them, but sweet potato leaves are edible. And so it's actually a dual crop, which is fun. And then tucked in here, because I had basil to plant, and so I stuck it in every corner of the garden. I've got a very large basil in here. There's another one right here. There's another one right here. And there were a couple in the back that I think just got buried by the enthusiasm of the of the sweet potatoes. And then tucked in on the end here, I have a couple of onions that I was purposely allowing to go to seed, to collect seed. These are cipollini onions. And this is what we want to see, is this head starting to dry out. And then you're starting to see those little black seeds in there. I'll give this another week, and then I'll cut it and put it in a bag and let it dry. And then this one was already finished, and so this one did get cut, and I've got it in a bag drying. So onions are biannual, meaning they bloom in their second year. And so if you want to save seed from onions, that's always a good way to do it, is just tuck a few in someplace out of the way. This is Queen Lime Red Zinnias, which really needed to be staked, and I never got around to staking it, so she is just everywhere but I need to get in here and actually just pick some of these for a bouquet because they're gorgeous. I really just love this variety. I think they're so, so pretty. And it's funny, I was watching a woman who's known for her zinnias, Floret Farms, was doing a video on Instagram not too long ago, and she was talking about when the best time to harvest zinnias is. And she was saying, if you shake them and there's any wobble, it's too early. And she said a lot of people harvest them like this, and she really likes them when they're more like fully rounded out. That one's too far gone, but there's probably a better example. She loves them like this. I don't love this. I like them like right about here is my happy place. And I would do these, except I know they've got a long way to go. But I don't love them when they get the complete domed top. There's a good example of, she was saying this is like her preferred time to harvest them. But you want to harvest them when they have a stiff stalk, was the short end of that. And then we have, obviously back in here, this is our pearmain apple, which has put on a lot of growth this year. It's been happy. You can see how shady this spot is in the summer because of this huge hedge of hops. But it's done well this year. We put some drip irrigation on it, and that helped give it a little bit of extra life. And then we've just been trying to keep the hops from climbing into it and knocking back this comfrey. A lot of that green that you see in there behind the sweet potatoes, that's comfrey. And once you get comfrey going, it basically never stops. So you'll never be without it. So be sure you plant it someplace that you want it. And then the other thing I wanted to show you guys, so I had this table out here that I like to set things down on when I'm harvesting. And I got stung a couple of weeks ago. And so I found the nest and sprayed it. And then I was out here yesterday and got stung again and was like, I sprayed that nest. Where the heck are they coming from? And so I ended up finding, you guys see, there's one wasp nest, but there's one there. And then it turns out there were two on this side. So that one down there in the corner, that's the first one that stung me that I sprayed. And then this one is the one that got me yesterday. And I sprayed the Jesus out of this one because I was pretty mad about it. But unfortunately, this is a great little plastic outdoor table that we picked up, used from a big box store where they had been using it for plants, and then they were discarding it because there was a little bit of damage on it. But unfortunately, the shape of this is perfect for wasps. And so, yeah, got stung twice. And 3 different nests on there. So I've now turned that up on its side, hopefully discouraging them. And I think I'm just going to leave those nests on the table as a warning rather than taking them down, so that hopefully anybody else who decides they want to get in there decides to leave me the heck alone. I was going to show you. So this is shishito. And shishitos are a green frying pepper. They're just delicious. Put in a really hot pan with some olive oil and blistered and then eaten with salt. They're kind of a snack, Spanish tapas snack. And I harvested all of the good-sized ones out of here a couple days ago, so there's not a lot. But this is about the perfect size. You want them to be about half the length of your hand. But really delicious and very, very prolific plant. And so this is why I only have one, because I've planted 2 in the past and ended up with way, way, way too many. And then here is our Hungarian black, looking gorgeous. And then I've taken most of the peppers off of it, but there's our one jalapeno. And then lastly, here's our green stalk with our strawberries in it. And I did get a little bit of a flush of late fruit off of this, despite the 100-degree heat. So I've not a lot, and it's not super sweet because of the heat, but there's one. So I've gotten a little bit out of here, and I mostly am finally starting to see like good green growth instead of like this. I've had a lot of this. And so I've been feeding this. You can water and feed from the top. And so I've been putting fish fertilizer in here like every other watering for a while. trying to balance out the soil a little bit. But millions of runners, so if I wanted more of these not super great strawberries, I could start about 100 plants, but they're really not great. And then this is on a spinner, and so this whole thing turns. There's another one. So I'm getting a little bit of extra, but mostly I'm getting a lot of real enthusiastic runners. Yeah, they're just tangling up. So I've got, there's one runner here, and then it's traveling like all the way down to the ground. So strawberries are enthusiastic little buggers. And if I had any blank spots, I could just tuck these into the soil pockets that were empty and let them root, which is actually how I got some of these going last year. But yeah, so anyway, so it's still alive. I'm still trying to decide if I want to keep it or not, because I haven't been super satisfied with the amount of fruit that I've gotten out of this. But green stalk hanging in there for sure. So that is the August perennial garden. Like some things restarting, some things going strong and right in the full harvest. Some things pretty much finished up and need to be pulled out, just kind of typical. I do try to do a little bit of a fall garden, but not a ton. At this point, I'm usually pretty tired. So, but I am just so thrilled with those cucumbers. That is really fun. So there's the raised bed garden, August 9th, 2024. Stay tuned for the in-ground garden in the next video.